For a mid-sized Midwestern town, Fort Wayne has international diversity. 6% of its population is foreign-born. 9% of Allen County residents speak a language other than English in their home. Further, more than 70 languages are spoken in the greater Fort Wayne area. On this week's Primetime 39, we'll learn more about help for those who are struggling in this community where language and culture can be barriers. And we'll do that by welcoming members of Crime Victim Care of Allen County to the program. With us are Dr. Sunita Mako, CVC's founder and executive director, Barbara Chakanyuka, CVC Family Care Manager, and Patrick Chesbro, CVC's Addictions Recovery Manager. And we invite you to join the conversation with your questions and comments by using the number that you see on the screen. And Sunita, Barbara, Patrick, welcome again. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you.
You know, it seems a couple months ago there was a special event, National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And the theme this year was New Challenges, New Solutions. That sounds like a pretty good descriptor for Crime Victim Care of Allen County.
Yes.
Tell me how that got started. It's a very fascinating, short, but very incredible history since, what, about 2005?
Yeah, Crime Victim Care of Allen County is an organization that I can say came as inspiration when I worked with a victim of crime who happened to be non-English speaking, someone who needed help, someone who needed to know where to go and get services, and someone who needed someone to provide interpretation services and advocacy through the system. And as I was looking around the community, I realized that we did not have services for this kind of people. I went back to my office, I said my short prayer, and I said, I really want to start something that will bring transformation to new Americans who come to this community. So we started to work with the victims. 2006, 2007, we've worked with the victims, and now we've grown to initiate programs to provide prevention so that we don't wait until someone is victimized to help them, but at least we are trying also to prevent victimization from happening.
You know, there was a movie a few years back called Lost in Translation, and it seems to speak volumes, truly, about what we can imagine at first glance some of the problems of adjustment can be. But it is not just language, is it?
No.
Barbara, you see that in your work. Talk about that.
I do see that a lot, because what happens is that it's not just language. You have religions, you have cultures. Language is just part of it. And basically what happens is that the people that we work with, the communities that we work with, the different diversities, they respond to any issue, whether it's victimization, through the eyes of their culture, through the religion. If someone is Buddhist, it's a journey for them. So if they are victimized, it means when we provide services, they have to be services that have to be in line with what their beliefs are. So you have to be very, very detailed as you work with victims, and that is part of, like as you mentioned earlier on, the challenges, the new challenges that we are saying, let's respond to those so that at least we give the victim, the families, some kind of wholeness, some kind of path to healing.
How do you make these connections in the community? Where do you find those who you know need you, and vice versa?
That's a very good question. You have to make an intentional effort to do outreach. And at the beginning, I remember when we started, when CVC started, we literally went out to different communities in the community, identifying their leaders, whether it was in the mosque, whether it was in the, at the temple. We would find leaders from there who would then introduce us to their communities, and we would talk about the issues that were very important for them to be acculturated into their new home country. So that we had to be very, very intentional, and we continue to do that through a lot of cultural competency trainings. So that helps a lot in making the awareness quite effective for us in our community.
And you just touched on a term that, Cindy, I'd like you to help define. Patrick and others, please comment. Cultural competency.
Yes.
It seems like that's where it all sort of starts. What did I just say?
You ask, that's one of the best questions that you are asking, because I think every human being, as we grow in the community or where we live, we change with the changes that take place in our lives. Be it in the family, when you are a parent, or when you are a father, when you have a new child come home, that changes the way you function. When you have a new promotion in your job, it changes the way you respond to situations. When you have new Americans come to the community, every person has to be prepared to adjust, at least to learn from each other. Not only the Americans learning about other cultures, but other cultures also learning about America. And the more we learn from each other, the better integration takes place in the community. And when that integration takes place, then there's no conflict, there's no tension. You get people go out, they say, I see this, I understand they are coming from a different cultural perspective, background, and I can create room so that they can grow and become contributing members to our community. So cultural competence is a learning process. It's not something that is done once and you forget about it. Every day we are learning about readjustment. Barbara mentioned about acculturation. All that process that takes place takes intentional effort of every person making a move towards a better integration in the community.
Patrick, for you, the challenge has to be, I would imagine, when there wants to be connection, but there are other factors getting in the way, substance abuse apparently one of those.
Absolutely. When we talk about cultural competency, it is of the utmost importance. It's probably number one when I deal with my clients. When I approach people that have come to my program, one of the things that I have to consider is that many times these are refugees or immigrants who have come to our country. They are a minority. Now they have been tagged as somebody that having addiction problems. So now they're a minority within a minority, and they come to my program and they already have trust issues. They already have issues with intimacy or communication. So I have to be extremely careful about how I communicate with them. The addictions program itself in America, much of the addictions program is centered around Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Many of the refugees that we have that have come to our country, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are wonderful. They are very steeped in the Judeo-Christian way of thinking, the relational, religious communication of a higher power. There's a higher power in myself. And many of the refugees that come over, say from Burma, I believe like 90 or 95% of the Burmese population are Buddhist. So that way of thinking of the relational higher power is very foreign to them. So we have to be extremely sensitive. What is their religious background? What is their cultural background? And how can we incorporate the 12 steps in a way that will make sense to them and that they will be able to hold on to and make a part of their lives to help their recovery go more smoothly.
And let me just ask you, how do you do that?
Again, it's very, very tough. But for me, the idea of a higher power can be found in many different ways. Many people come in, and we have had Muslim clients that are extremely sound in their faith, and I encourage them to hold on to the faith they bring. People that are Buddhists are very strong in their faith, and I encourage them to hold on to that. It's just the point of reference. How are we referring to this power that's greater than themselves? You know, for a Buddhist, it may be the fellowship of recovery. It may be the community of recovery. It may be the people in the class. As a whole, we are stronger than the individual. And that's what we need to find. We need to find something that is greater than their experience with drugs and alcohol. If not, drugs and alcohol are God. They become what's most important in their lives. So we need to find a way to provoke an experience that will help them find a reason and a purpose. You know, that will include looking at the family structure, looking at the importance of their role in the family structure. Many times my clients will come to the United States, and the country they're from, they're the provider. They're the ones that are the money makers and the providers, the males. They come to the United States, and it's very hard for the male population in the refugee community to find work. Many times the females will become the sole breadwinners. That emasculates the man, and it brings on depression and other self-loathing ideas. So we try to be an encouraging program, an empowering program, so that they will, ultimately come to find, self-worth and the ability to move forward with their recovery.
What I see sometimes in this, and these are maybe my own aha moments, hopefully they are shared if they are valid with others in the community, is that with all of our linguistic differences and cultural differences, we have a lot in common. We're all finding that in our homes or in our neighborhoods there are the challenges of trying to find, if you will, domestic tranquility, or we deal with our own logistical changes when we go from one school to another, or move from one side of town to another. Here is, in this case, something compounded by language, but it's culturally moving from one country to another. And you're bringing a lot of things that you can identify, but trying to get at them to resolve, as you say, in a preventive way, which now at least it sounds in the 8 years since you, and 8 years in August coming up, the CVC is finding some allies in the field. Talk about the partnerships that you have now found in the community, also realizing out of the different missions you are finding some common goals to pursue.
You know, Bruce, you identify connections. Patrick mentioned that there's no way you can do things by yourself. I like talking about Professor Mbiti's philosophy. I am because you are, and since you are, therefore I am. So there's no way you can do things by yourself. Even organizations, once you start doing work, you have to look at where are there collaborative opportunities that addresses issues in a way that will eventually take care of the problems that we might face in the community. So Crime Victim Care has established a lot of collaborations with the different agencies, you know, talking about the police department, the YWCA, the Department of Child Services. We have a lot of organizations, Parkview, Park Center, you know, all these are, they provide health care, others provide prevention of abuse, others provide the services from the police department when they respond to situations. When we collaborate, the officers know how to respond in situations that might be linguistically or culturally challenging to them. So when we provide those services, the officers also help us to understand how the law enforcement functions in this country. The more I learn about how it functions, the more information I will be able to have to take it back to our immigrant and refugee population. Now, without collaboration, we cannot do any work. The faith communities that we have in this in Fort Wayne and Allen County, they are amazing communities that come out and say, what can we do so that we can also contribute to make it better for our community? You know, that's how human life is. Wherever you move, if Bruce, I moved from Fort Wayne, I went to another place and started living there, I would like to know the people who live there, what they do and what works for the community and what doesn't work, so that I can set boundaries and support the one that is going to build the community to be a better place to live.
I know that one thing that can be tremendously powerful, and Barbara, you can talk of this, is mentoring. Yes. I'm sort of adopted, I'm taken in, I'm being guided in some regard. With your work with family support programs, how does mentoring function? How does that go?
Yes, thank you so much, Bruce. Basically, as the new families come to Fort Wayne, a lot of challenges are there because we have two cultures that are functioning in many of our, if not most of our families in the home. So you find there's that situation where you have children now who've become more part of the American society, but the parents have no idea how to function in a democratic society. And a lot of times we find that very shocking to say, how can you are free now, you are here. But if you've not been raised to be free, how do you even exercise the ideology of being free and translate that so that at least your children understand that? So a lot of times what we do is that we work a lot with the volunteers in the community so that at least it's not just mentoring the children, but we're also mentoring the parents, because the parents are finding it very, very difficult, because we are talking about communities that are really live the community life where if I find my child smoking or doing something that I believe is not acceptable, I have right without the the parent telling me to, probably maybe provide consequences for the child. And then when you come here, they are required to feel as individual families, and that has been very traumatic for a lot of our families. So they find themselves just alienated from not just the legal system, but also just society in general. So it's very, very important to get a lot of mentors. And usually we try to get volunteers from the American American mainstream community, and also getting from the leaders from the community, so they can work together, so that at least when we have the American mentor working with the community person, to bring about that balance in the home, to say, okay, fine, the children have become part of the mainstream society, and we want to make sure that they maintain the culture, because that has been the biggest challenge for a lot of our families.
I know that we have 2 of the 3 programs represented here from CVC. Perhaps you could share a little bit about the victim care program that CVC offers, and perhaps introduce us. We have an image of a couple of the additional staff folks that we can be sure are incorporated in the program.
The victim care program is one of the programs that has really started CVC. And what we have seen is that when victims come to our office, first, they don't speak the language. Secondly, they have a cultural misunderstandings. Third, they don't know how the systems work in this country. For example, going to court, sitting in court, answering questions, or reading the papers they are given in court. It is all shocking. You know, even if you speak English, when you go to court, it can be really intimidating. So our staff, they do court accompaniment. They go with the victims to court. They sit with them to provide emotional and moral support. They also help them to read those forms, legal forms, and interpret those forms for them, so that whatever they sign, at least they understand what they are signing is not something that they don't understand. Sometimes, because of the mistrust that they have had for a long time, the law enforcement, for the court systems, it becomes even scary if you are a victim and you are told to go to court. Even if you are told you have some rights, you don't want to go to access those rights simply because you were traumatized in the refugee camp by the court systems or the law enforcement systems. So it is that aspect of being there to reorient this population to understand what rights do they have that they can access in the community, providing counseling, and not only just counseling, multicultural approach of counseling, someone who understands the cultural dynamics and how to ask questions and how to respond to the questions that diverse immigrant and refugee populations have. I think one of the things I've seen with the victims is the kind of recovery that takes place. When victims recover, they go back to the community. They become not only volunteers, but they're able to go even to the schools and study and get secure education, secure job, and become contributing members in the community. If they are left as victims, they will be traumatized, and it will cause more problems to the community. It will even be more expensive to the community. So it is a recovery that later on gives back to the community the best out of it.
It seems like in all of the work you do, there's this empowerment that is also then a pay it forward, where those who are successful in the addictions program can then be enlisted, I assume, to help take that message into the next situation.
Absolutely. When I talk to my clients, my class acts as, and partly as a self-help group, but it also acts as a psychoeducational group. We have a lot of topics that I make sure we touch upon that are very important for the refugee community. We'll talk about things such as sexual law, what constitutes pornography, what's the legal age of consent. We'll talk about the legal limit 0.08. We'll talk about driving law. These are all things that most of my clients have already, in one way or another, broken a law or been convicted of an offense, and I would like to empower them and protect them so that as they move forward, not only are they securing their recovery, but they're learning about our culture so they don't re-offend in a way where they weren't even sure they didn't even know that they were breaking the law. I want to be sure some of these major things that may not have been the case in their country, they know that what is acceptable here in the United States, and how do I move forward and be a productive, law-abiding citizen here in the United States. So, and with that, I also encourage them that all I can do many times is educate them on what is available to them. It is their responsibility. In their community, nothing helps the promotion of the program better than one of their own. You know, if they can find recovery, if they can find security in their lives and bring that message to their community, my hope is that it starts a fire, and that fire moves beyond CVC. You know, we would really like to see that go into the community itself.
We see an image here. Describe some of the folks here who look like they are also colleagues in the cause. Sunita, who do we have here?
We have several events that we do in the community, and I cannot mention how many, but these are some of the training events, I think, related to those who help with interpretation in the community, those who help with social work in the community. You can see the images of the training we did most recently on human trafficking. And we had to invite some collaborative agencies to come in and help us in training. The police department was there, the local FBI was there to help address some of the legal issues related to that. And the goal is to find ways of helping the victims. And as we help the victims, we know that they will eventually find ways of being contributing members in our community. And the people you see in these images are people who have spent several days and hours learning about cultural competency and learning on how best to give to the community so that services are provided professionally, and those communities that don't trust the agencies will come to their office and say, you know, I came here, I received the service, I was not treated as a statistic, I was treated as a human being when I entered in this office.
And I think that when you're describing these services, trust is the big one.
Yes.
And Barbara, in your program, if you establish that, I assume all things become possible.
Very much so. I believe not just with our immigrant population, but in any kind of service that you're providing. If a client trusts the work that you're bringing to them, they will definitely be forthcoming with a lot of issues that they, like you said at the beginning, we are, most of the time we don't realize how the same we are. But once you establish good relationship and providing trust is the most important piece, because one of the ways that we do that is making sure when we go in and work with our families, we are also providing interpreters, people who are like them, who speak like them, and understand their culture. So if there are any misunderstandings during when you provide services, then you have the interpreter to back up what's going on. Because a lot of times with the language, a lot of stuff is lost in translation and interpretation, because a lot of these, some of the languages, I know personally for me, the language, sometimes it might not mean the same thing in the English language. So it's very, very important to make sure when we provide services to our clients, we have interpreters who understand, who are part of the community, the religion, and in that way, that helps a lot. Where if a story is, you know, in the English language, you have yes, no. But in many languages, yes, no can be a whole sentence. It can also be a paragraph. But you have to have those skills to be able to say, okay, to decipher, to say, what is the client asking from me? What are they saying to me? And so now that's where the interpreters and trained interpreters become extremely important in our work. Because that trust, then you build that trust, you make sure they understand this is information for them, this is for their support, this is part of their acculturation, and that helps. And I've seen many, many successful stories, because once you build that trust, a lot of times they come back to you even after you know, the services are done. You know.
Yeah. And I'm imagining that there is always room for more support, for another volunteer, for someone to contribute sweat equity or any other kind of resource.
Can I refer to number 6?
Number 6 very quickly.
Yeah.
You can call up number 6 for us. Go ahead.
Her name is Raisoy. She is my interpreter that I have in my class with me. We affectionately refer to her as Roxy. She is, we couldn't do the program without people like her. She's an interpreter, but much more than that. She goes above and beyond anything we could do to make these programs work.
We saw another staffer as well. I want to get the information graphic up if we could with the logo for CVC, because this is important as well. If what we have been able to share with you this evening has prompted or encouraged you to get in touch with the staff, Sunita, there's the website, cvcin.org. Also, the facilities now on Lake Avenue over by Parkview.
Yeah, the facility is wonderful, donated by Parkview. We are so glad that Parkview invested in this organization, and many local foundations that have really invested in this in the organization. I'm so thankful for those in the community who have done that.
And we're thankful you're here as well. Sunita, Barbara, Patrick, thank you all so very much for being a part of what it was a very fast half hour. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your weekend here on PBS 39. For all of us with Primetime 39, I'm Bruce Haynes. Have a good night.
That was fast.
That's how.